I feel like we got a few more gems out of this time than we did the last time.
Oh, that's basically just whiskey.
So, what's your story about today?
Alright, my name is Ben, and I'm here to tell you the story about the magical history of the toothpick. The smaller one didn't show up on the camera, so we're using the bigger one now. So our story starts in 1869. Nice.
Nice.
And Charles Forster, American entrepreneur, businessman, visionary. He's in Brazil. And he sees the country and he's like, this place is amazing. These people are amazing. These things are amazing. I can exploit the shit out of this. He sets up a factory, which is a weird thing to go to. You gotta remember, it's 1869. Nice.
Nice.
And the Industrial Revolution has been going on for
Today's steel
a
mill.
bit of time. Fuck, I'm very drunk. And the Industrial Revolution's been going on, and like it went from the entirety of human evolution. One guy can make one shoe, like whatever, and all of a sudden, one kid, one single child who doesn't even have both of his arms, can crank out like 20 shoes in a day, easy. And Charles Forrester's like, fuck, we can do that shit here. But he doesn't want to make shoes. He doesn't want to make like steam engines or anything else everyone else is doing. He wants to make the humble toothpick.
Why the toothpick?
Anyway, he wants to make the toothpick, and in his mind, it's much easier to do in Brazil where labor is cheaper, and this is a fun thing. Like, we all kind of thought this was like a new invention, like, oh, I need to make this thing. Let's go to a poorer country with less human rights laws, and we can make it cheaper, faster. But they were doing this back in like the 1860s. So Charles Forster opens up a factory, he gets a bunch of people to make the toothpicks on the cheap. And obviously they're all like, thanks, pale person. Could you maybe like pay us some money for our labor? Like, you showed up and you taught us about like capitalism and land ownership. Is there any chance you could like, give us some of this money you're always talking about to like, let us buy food, or, like some of the land that we're pretty sure we already owned until you showed up? And Charles Forrester's just like, no, I'll pay you in bananas. And then he probably said a racial slur, which I will not repeat. Anyway, so Charles Forster, he's got his boatload full of the exploitation sticks, and he ships them back up to America. Now this is post-Civil War, which probably also explains why he decided to go to South America for the slave wages. Anyways, so he gets back to the northern United States, like Connecticut, New York, because it's like post-Civil War, and the northern United States was the part that had the money. And also still like buildings, and I guess like food to eat. And he starts trying to sell them to restaurants. And here's the thing you gotta remember, like it's 1869. Nice.
Nice.
People didn't have like prefabricated factory-made toothpicks. Like if you had some food and your teeth, you just like took your finger, just kind of like you got in there with it, or like maybe you like took like the knife that you had because it was the 1860s, and you just sort of like took a stick and you just whittled it down. You're good to go. Like no one had ever heard of like purchasing a toothpick, and so like he would go to restaurants and shit, and he'd be like, so it's the 1800s, so like he wouldn't just say you want a toothpick. He'd like dressed up as some kind of weird like I have a mustache medicine man thing, like, hello, would you like to buy some of Dr. Charles Forster's prefabricated, prehydrogenated, like medical, dental, oral fixation devices? At which point, the people at the restaurants would be like, I don't know what words you're speaking. Also, no, fuck that shit. If there's food in my teeth, I'm just gonna use my finger. Or like, I'm gonna just whittle one with this knife, which I will stab you with if you don't get off the premises immediately. Well, Charles Forrester, visionary, was not deterred. Next step, hired a bunch of students. Because, even back then, students were broke as shit. Which is wild, because there was like, at the time, like this is before inflation, there was like maybe like $4 US circulating in the US economy, and somehow the students still didn't have any of them. Anyway, he paid the students, and they'd like go to restaurants, and they would eat the food, and they'd be like, well, shit, there's some food in my teeth now. Do you guys have any of them pre-hydrogenated, pre-acclimated? I made too hard of a word.
Do you want to do a clean take with the script?
Do you guys have any Dr. Charles Forster's prefabricated dental hygienation utensils? At which point, the restaurant owners would say no. And the students would like flip shit. They'd like start screaming and like throwing tables over and like shitting in people's chicken. You can't prove that didn't happen. And then they just fucking leave a mess of the place. And then like a couple days later, Dr. Charles Forster would show up and he'd be like, would you guys like to buy some Dr. Charles? And they'd be like, shut the fuck up. Give me every single one of those motherfuckers you got. Here's our money. Just take it. Just give us the toothpicks. Don't say those other words. And all of a sudden, Charles Forster he's just raking in the money. He's just like combing it in. It became like an institution.
I think the cleanest we had goes all the way up to the students fuck shit up and then they left. Please don't swallow that on accident. Like, dude, the hospital's right across the street, actually.
Anyway, it became like an institution.
And he never got in trouble for this?
It's the 1860s. How are you gonna prove anything? With the video evidence? They didn't invent that for like 50 years.
Hey, that's a good point.
People were flying in space before that. No, that's not how that works.
That's the wrong 69.
That's the wrong 69.
Nice.
Nice. Anyway, every restaurant was like, well, they all have toothpicks. We should have toothpicks. Otherwise, we're just gonna look like fucking weird, gross savages that don't have toothpicks. Better buy those toothpicks from that one guy. And like, other companies were like, shit, how does he make these so fast? We can crank out like one, but like it feels like he's like cranking out 20 for every one we have. But like it's also like being made by a kid who doesn't even have one arm. Like I don't get it. What's he doing? It took off, and like Charles Forster's just like he's just like raking in the money. He's just like this cash on top of cash on top of cash. It's stacks on stacks.
It's really hard to stack toothpicks, though. That's not funny.
Oh, funny. Anyway, so they became such a ubiquitous thing with dining establishments that like fucking dudes would like just go to fancy restaurants and they just kind of like stand outside being like, God, that taste is so good. They didn't eat there. They didn't have nearly enough money to eat there. Just a ploy. They went there to pick up chicks. And like girls would walk by and the dudes would be like, hey baby, check out who has enough money to eat. And like it worked at least a couple times.
That's really convincing, yeah.
The moral of the story is the humble toothpick made one man an extremely large amount of money and got at least a couple dudes jerked off in a nearby park.